A major seems to be the solar tonality for Bach. Here the beginning of Book 1's end of Book 2. I have sadness to stop, but the point of this is to express what I would like to suggest one could extract from these elements for one's own interpretational choices. And you can start with the objective facts. 4/4, 12/8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Or 12/8, 1, 2, 3, 4. In Book 2, in 12/8, the beats are inevitably by a third longer because they have 3/8 notes, and never in the 4/4 they have 2. Does that mean it's faster? Does it mean it can be also considered as, for the left hand, by the quarter notes of the melodic bass line, the sense of the pace? And if it's a more expressive pace of the chromaticism, the descending tetrachord chromatically, from the Greek color, usually used in minor for the lament, for the chaconne, for the passacaglia. But it's not in minor, it's major and chromatic. Of the 19th century Romantic music, which is melodic and harmonized under, compared to the Baroque, which is really bass line, which is harmonized up, of which comes a melodic line, which is an emanation of the bass line. It's a decoration of the harmonization of the, what you could call the continuo. And then you have in the middle voice of the left hand, so important to voice and not to combine, either because of the decay, either because of the difficulty to have different dosages on the tips of the fingers according to which voice is played. Mi, la, re, sol, do, fa. The descending fifths in the tenor and the descending fifths in the bass. Overlapping. And ultimately, perhaps the composer imagined that they will blend. But he notated them with up and down stems to mean that we need to hear them as if they were stretched. Which is easier to comprehend for our listening filtered brain, and of course to hear it with the layered quality of elegance. And then when he has the dominant, and this time in the bass, the quarter notes of the bass line for the first two bars are in the inner voice. And this way, now you have in the right hand the overlapping fifths that you had in the left hand. All that means what? It's a fact on the score. How do I make it to be part of the musical statement, narration, flow, direction, purpose, and coated in an expectation of what we could define a mood, or perhaps an atmosphere, a benevolent, a still gallant, something without dramatic effects. The left hand leaps with an octave, and the melodic line leaps with a sixth. Both are opening to the top. They're rising. They are embracing the beauties of the fifth and of the octave. And you hear how these intervals, these leaps, and then these step motions, chromatic for the one, and the other one with drops and risings of patterns of step motion with inside. You see, the fruits are everywhere on this tree, so you can taste them, you can be smelling them and breathe them, intake the beauties and bring them out with very much simplicity. You don't want to just always, of course, as I said, it's you shouldn't want, but it happens to want to express it. And then you can say, and anybody who's sane will say it's too much. Just play what it is. You're the craftsman, he's the creator. Don't recreate the creation, just state it. And so it comes to the point of finding the right tone of expression. Am I going to speak like this? Am I going to speak like this? Am I going to speak like that? Just because it's already in, I don't have to input more. You know what? I believe both are right. If you play Book 2 with the Siciliana, the long short, and then in the bass line, and then the imitation. And what happens in the imitation of the right hand? Half a bar, second half of the bar, imitation. Then again, the full bar of the top. And now the acceleration is every beat. So do you have to enhance it, or does it speak by itself? Yes, it does speak by itself. No, you don't need to enhance it. What you can do is hint it, open to it, smile to it. It's not a cheesy, gratuitous fact. It doesn't have to be that you cannot play it. I would play this for A minor. Of Book 2. A chromatic two-bass invention. And it's interesting to observe how Book 1 in A major uses the chromatic descent, the same chromatic descent in the left hand, and technically a chromatic scale is all semitones, therefore it's nor major nor minor, it should be just neutral, but it's always, well, always, that's not right obviously, mostly used in minor, like the three-voice invention in F minor. or the Cantata 12, Weinen, Klagen, Zorgen, Sagen. Associate the chromatic melodic bass line drop to the lament of the chaconne and the passacaglia, but in major and then A minor book 2. I think that's what makes the culture of the interpretation, is that you have heard, studied, observed, lived, combined, compared, tasted, dreamed of, been stricken by, or been puzzled by, or being mysteriously called for by some options that are taken by some composers of the choice of this, of the choice of that, the meter, the pulse, the pattern, the decoration, the tonality, the modality, the tonality's affirmation through subdominant compared to the dominant without the leading tone. As Bach does 1-4-5-1 more than 1-2-5-1 in his preludes, but that is probably balances itself, but not 1-5-1 per se. And so then you can organize the rhythmic pattern of the details of the pulse. For instance, in this case, short long compared to mostly long short. Quarter eight, eighth quarter. Then combination of the two, ta 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 ta, that can combine become a hemiola. That is the pulse, or the polypulse, that is superimposed at the different levels, like and everything is in superimposed layers, of which, of course, some of them, if you take them on a snapshot, are verticalized. So you hear here. But in fact, it's a result of the superimposed layers. And the layers go somewhere. Mi, la, sol, la, do, si, do is the rise of the sixth. And then answer goes rise of the seventh. And then the next bar, it's only the rise of the third. So you can do. Mapping your expressive leaps, your your higher notes, your middle notes, your the whole texture, the whole topography of the terrain, of the expression, which has not only a single story telling, but combined you have at least three in this. And what is most important in the harmonic progressions, in my humble opinion, for the interpretation choices, is the rhythm of the harmonic progressions. If they go by bar, by beat, by half bar, or all of a sudden accelerate itself, creates a sense of rhythmic accelerando, or the opposite of a rhythmic ritenuto stagnation when it holds one note. Or then when it has the emotion, where you had a harmony, a beat. When in the beginning, few bars earlier, you had a whole 4 beats of a bar in the same tonality of A major. Then dominant. So you have 4 beats of tonic, 4 beats of dominant, 4 beats of tonic, then subdominant for 1 beat. With passing tone, you can argue that this is a second degree, but let's say passing tone, then 5, 1, 6, 7, 5, which is both, yes, 1, and then 7 and 1 into 5. And then you restart the melodic line of the thematic material in the left hand, which was. So in Bach, there is the motion of the patterns of the decoration versus the real notes, the ones that are the ones that guide you. Then the in-between notes, call it decorations, with this elegance of the patterns that he designs, 2 3 1 2 3 1, and never 1 2 3 1. They are divided by 3 a bit in the pattern of demonstration in the notation, but in their design and their change of directions in their leaps, they start from the second to the next first, 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1, and not 1 2 3. That's of course very purposefully to make my point. I had to exaggerate the accents on the beats. But if you don't, then you think of it without downbeats. Not that there is no downbeat or too much first downbeat, is that you need to use the downbeat as the arrival point from which you rebounds 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1, and not 1 2 3 1 2 3 1. These facts of the pulse, the harmony, the melody, the contrapoint, the polyphony, the layered voices, the phrasing, and the mood of the pattern, of course you have to take in account. Also, the few things that we have to take in account is the meter. Why 12/8? Why not 12/16? Why not 4/4 with triplets? Okay, it's his choice. And I still think that outside of the context of his time, where people would say, oh, this genre of Siciliana would be considered more for this tempo or that, today we are away from it. We compare and contrast, we study chronologically, we have access to music of before and music since. Inevitably, it's not transitional, it's by itself everything it is. And I think that we need to build our own clear, analytical, and intuitive, in the sense of musical connection, without only the filter of the analytical knowledge of observation of this and these and those facts. And just play it as we think we might find an ultimate interpretational choice through the articulations, the phrasing, the touch, the direction of the line, the dynamic range, and the tempo. As not to mention the pedal for the pianist, but not always, not often, at least not on passing tones, for the fact that you have too many collisions of seconds and becomes blurry. But you could also subphrase it in the Baroque violin or cello or string instrument bowing of short 2 and 1. Then you enhance the long short, which you have in the left hand by the rhythm. But if you want to contradict that in the bowing, you can do short long in the right hand. That becomes a statement, and perhaps you see what it is that the more you go in depth in the options, in the particles, in the details, the micro, then you have to think the macro. How many bars do I have in a phrase? If it took me 4 beats, 12/8 notes to establish the tonic, and another so many for the dominant, then I've done in 3 bars of 12/8, 1 5 1. And all of a sudden in the next 2 bars I go change, 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 change. I've changed harmonies every beat for 2 bars after I had 3 bars of one group of 4 beats per harmony. What does that mean? Is that the traction that we will feel in the expression? It doesn't mean we need to do crescendo, accelerando, or dramatization. Oh my God, it's busier. I want to bring out that it's busier. No, I think that the embedded elements in the writing are what makes the piece be what it is. Gracious, driven, emotional, both, all, some, another. And the phrasings that you can, sub-articulations bring, compared to the all detached, with direction, which is exactly right too. Or the legato fully with direction. Direction meaning with purpose. And you write down for yourself where you want to reach. Mi, and then re, si, la, si, re, do, re. And then mi, do, si, do, re, re, re. And then fa. So you place yourself mentally singing it like I did, sorry for the voice, or imagining it by telling it to yourself. Do, re, mi, fa, si, la, si, down. So you give yourself these incentive directions to reach this line, to go to this, how can we say, this way to be magnetically attracted to the arrival point. And if you do it with subarticulations or all detached or all legato, or subarticulation short long on the long short of the left hand, you add more and more layers of sophistication in the details. And you can say, but I don't care, I don't need to know, I don't want to count, I don't want to analyze, I don't want to know where is my dominant, subdominant, I wear how many beats of what. Okay, fine, that is true. You can do it on the paper, and then when you play it, you have to follow your instinct. Tension, release, rise, drop. And if you feel like you want it to be more driven than more so benevolent and calm and perhaps so elegant, you can do it also more driven and feisty. But it's the point of this exercise is to see, can we be convincing and convinced in the first place in order to be convincing with another option of articulation, tempo, drive, which brings it to another genre. If it was dotted with Of course we don't have the right to change the rhythm, but just to think outside of the box. Faster, it will become a jig. Compared to the more sleepy, dreamy. How much, even if you do that with the unification of the sound of the piano legato, but piano is in timbre of instrument, what about voicing? So you don't hear the second voice equal to the first while the decaying dotted half happens. Or then they blend. And you don't care about the decay because after all, it is not of your making, it's the instrument. You could also perhaps strike or trail. It busy, it ugly, it's not necessary. I mean, he did it in G minor of book 1. But he doesn't do it here for the long values. So you could also change the articulations. The top part long short, the short part, the bottom part short long. Or every time you rethink also the quarter note, eighth note pattern, do you give the flow of the impulse like in a bowing on a short long? Mi, do, mi, la, si, do, la, mi, 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 mi. It becomes an impulse and a reflux. Or do you bow from the long to the short? And this way you bring out the notes on the beat. You see, even if you're completely, and you should be strictly following the score, thinking outside of it in order to play it better as it is, in order to play more meaningfully, in the sense of what you convince yourself why it's not the jig, why it's not the Siciliana, it's perhaps something evocative possible, but in any case, you have to find the tempo that corresponds to your quality of touch, articulation, phrasing, direction of the line, and narrative storytelling, persuasive eloquence. And when you do these, compared to this, or to the, that there was a wrong note, E sharp, I'm sorry for the secondary dominant leading tone. But the point of the story is that it doesn't mean anything goes and is right as long as you're convinced. In part, it is essential to be convinced, either by this analytical or the way that you play through different options, like I just demonstrated a few, and you tell yourself, no, really, I cannot not do this. As they would, people say, for me this is, and for me this. And you know, it's so interesting because you observe that there are 20 years between the two. God forbids Bach lived long for his time period in terms of length of life, but still 20 years between 1720 and 1740 for the man who will die in 1750 and who was born in 1685. I would say it's a mighty gap. Through which so much happens, evolving the style, the expression, the job offers, the church music, the secular music, the different instrumental and vocal pieces he wrote. Everything brought him to evolve, and when you hear the two, you feel like he could have written them the next day. I think there is a permanence in Bach in terms of style from the beginning of his orphan age as a child till the end. He bathed in this tradition, obviously, of North German polyphony for organists, which is, of course, why the polyphony is so developed, harpsichord being, in fact, the home instrument for Bach to practice, teach, and rehearse, but organ being the one on which he listens, hears, and can in fact bring out, like the trio sonatas, the three voices equally with the length of height of length notes that stay and that don't decay. And of course he writes for harpsichord like he writes for voice or instrumental, without any any desire to to comply to any limitations of decay, of capacities, of intonations, of anything. He writes pure voice leading. It's almost like as if his music is as meaningful to read silently in your head, as meaningful to play in different ways, Baroque instruments, modern instruments, no instruments, or electronic instruments. It's proteiformic because it is the essence, like water, of the elements that we need, like air, like it's a necessity. And I think that if we colorize it, we give it a different flavor, we spice it a little bit by the articulations compared to the... It's only because at some point we add a little more in our interpretation of some kind of specific genre description. And some of them are finger preludes, I meant, and other are more singing, like this or this. Exercised, analytical, emotional, but also intellectual observation of the dropping thirds with anticipation arpeggiatura is Book 2, F minor, but here in major. So it's not a lament, I guess, it's a enjoyment. But it's the same. It's the same tool. So you see, you can enrich your thoughts by comparisons, by contrasts, by analyzing what you feel, hear, imagine when you discover it by sight reading it. Of course, you can listen to others play, but as soon as you hear it by somebody else played, then it's their point of view. Here, it's the point of this exercise is to develop the analytical and conserve and enhance the intuitive capacities of combining how to express the best this piece, regardless of who believes what is right or wrong, because at some point somebody will tell you it's not supposed to be that way. Fine, that's what teachers do, to define, and then they make you reach a certain point in a certain direction, and you have to search until you prove that you can do it, regardless if you can change mind, and you might the length of your lifelong change and say, oh, so many years I played it this way, now I'll do it. But it's not about a fancy and some kind of superficial choice of, oh, I could do this or that, and if I'm convincing through my conviction of the day, then fine. To a certain extent, that is true. We build it out of tradition, out of knowledge, out of some kind of ground from which, of what we studied in terms of everything in music, from the grammar to the analysis to the syntax, to the expression, to the styles, to the genres. And so the more we are aware, the more we know, but ultimately we should still compare it with what it means to us intuitively by our emotion, call it talent, connection, intuition, something that is not always rational, but you could find a balance of the two. And now for the striking subject of the fugue of Book 1 with the A major, obviously because of the tonality, but the patterns of the ascending force. Doesn't it mean something? The fugue of 110 of Ludwig? Oh, but everybody, Professor, writes ascending force. It is true. Even harmony progressions in practicing sequences. So by itself, it's a generic fact. Nevertheless, Bach somebody studied from the Well-Tempered Clavier for his followers when most of his other music was forgotten until Mendelssohn brought it back, especially Matthew Passion and all these great giant important works in scope and length. But the prelude and fugues were studied as exercises for practicing the harpsichord. And some perhaps connected dots with other pieces, and some didn't. But nevertheless, I think a pianist who plays 110 by Beethoven, or he knows about it. Oh well, just to state. But it doesn't take away anything from Beethoven, nor does it make Bach some kind of template that is used by everybody. It could be that it's referred to, but Bach also perhaps referred it from others, and he uses this very playfully in his fugue. Of course, it is 12/8. He doesn't say 9/8, sorry. He doesn't say where are the articulations, if any. Is it? Is it? Or is it? With a short long or long short? Or bottom up, or up down. So it changes a lot, doesn't it, to do? I mean, it's a fruit tree, and the taste, and the leaves, and the fruits, and the branches, and the way he organizes his overlapping elements of the polyphony on the keyboard compared to Book 2. This one is the scale with the patterns inside. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do, the bass. La, si. So you follow the arrival points. I think it's very important to have this way of looking at three-dimensional extraction of the arrival points by beats or by group of beats or bars, of whichever structured organization of the statement he uses. Upbeat to start, and then syncopation. In fact, you have a first C sharp, which is the downbeat of the second beat, as downbeat as it gets. And then you have another arrival at the end on that same C sharp on the downbeat of the third beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. And Bach uses a lot these ties, these chain ties, which is in this case a rising suspension. It would be called retardation. And then right hand. Of course, when you have the right hand entrance with the answer or the dominant, the contra subject brings you the downbeats without any of the ties, and then the ties of the right hand's answer compared to the solo played subject few bars earlier makes all sense in terms of the beats. You hear where the beats are and you hear where the overlapping ties are. But when you play the beginning without other voice than the only, the ta 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 ta, you only hear it inside you. during the driven arising, it can hardly be slow tempo. Sorry for the wrong note. That's what I think. At the end of all these experimentations of different ways of expressing the material that is presented to you through the written score, whichever are your driven choices, by emotional or by intuitive or by completely manually written down, organized mapping of the arrival points and the structural elements that will ultimately combine direct and your choice of excluding other choices of what tempo you will take and what mood you want to set for this atmosphere, even if it's pure music by essence, as all fugues are, but they're not just disconnected from a certain, let's say, expression of a genre. So it is true, it's a lifetime search. And I expose here some of the elements that can be determining for your choices. But they are not excluding other ones, because every time I open this course, I discover more things I didn't see earlier. And I wonder, like, okay, I was an idiot when I was young, I didn't see more. Now I'm an idiot when I'm old, because I didn't still see everything. So I realized that I will die idiot, because I will never hear and see and discover everything that this music is. Wow, Bach, the man who heard before we could hear, who gives us music for the mind, for the spirit, for the soul, for the elements of solace or excitement, of abundance of voicing, of organizations, of bewildering, in the complexity as well as in simplicity, in usage of single reused materials for complex superimpositions of layers. You can be admirative of these different aspects of the piece. A fugue is, of course, a mathematical endeavor as well as a melodic endeavor, superimposing melodies in different directions, playable up and down and up. And there is no down and up, since there is no accompaniment and melody. There is only equal voices that go through different patterns of expression between thematic and secondary one, like the contra subject, and then afterwards you have even sections that only use a little bit of it in order to organize a sequence to modulate through a dry, call it a bridge. In fugue it's called an episode. But whatever you call it, you realize that the music starts at some point to go to some point, and in between things are happening that either you notice, either you don't notice, either you take for granted and you don't think you need to bring them out, or they mean to you so much, perhaps extra than necessity, but they just happen to mean to you so much, so you bring that, for instance, syncopation. And let's say you add an ornament, and then it becomes multiplied by the voicings. So then you took a stand. Or you think, okay, he didn't write it, the publisher didn't write it, I'm reciting only the, you know, the gospel of our text. I might have been told that in Baroque days they improvised decorations and ornamentations according to their fancy, because of course they lived in their time frame, so the stylistic fact was not a quest of am I within or am I outside of, because they didn't even have to think outside of, because they were in theirs. And that's what they wrote and what they played and that's what they heard and that's what they danced and what they sung. And so they were in their psychological bubble of their style, and they didn't, or even geographic region as well. and then the tuning, and then the phrasings, and then the allusions of to different styles, like the French overture, the Siciliana, the Napolitan sixth, the Picardy third. Okay, call them anything you want, but they are ingredients. They aren't the essence. The essence is how you feel the music goes to a tension and a release, to a climax or not, or to a continuous development, and how you can bring it out through your fingers with your touch and your mind and your whole heart, soul, and your brain and your mind, and how you count, how you breathe, how you stage it, how in fact you can consider that it needs you to bring out some things that you don't hear in other people. For instance, if you play the section the logic would be to always bring out the entrance of the subject, especially in the exposition, the third voice. And then what do you hear? That the voice that just finished the answer does a step-by-step motion rising of scale. By bringing it out too much, then you don't bring out the theme. I mean, the subject, forgive me. So you enter in a question to yourself, what will I do now? Do I bring or not the secondary voice, which is in longer values? Or do I just... And then you observe, where are the steps? And how do I do that without distracting? And so you realize that it comes back every time when the theme is in the, subject or answer in the top. You have the ascending scale in A major in the beginning, and then in F sharp minor, relative minor. These observations are very important. They're easier to detect, not only because the way it's bunched in the two staffs piano writing or keyboard writing notation, but if you take the time to copy the fugue on three staves, well, what is important is that this way you follow the voices for themselves, and then inevitably out of the three, the second, the middle one, will be inevitably pianistically playing, shared between the two hands, since the top and the bottom outer two ones will be played with the right and the left hand questionless, but the middle one between the two. And it has to be thought, imagined, organized as an independent voice. You didn't have three hands, but the point is that you start thinking the voice by itself, and not which hand plays it or which hand splits it, or how much you split of the two in two hands, the single middle part, so that you hear it and think it and organize it and play it and imagine it, construct it, if I may say, in the whole structure with its own integrity of a single voice, even if it's played with two hands alternatively. Oh, I know these things are easy to say in a sentence. In a lifetime to organize the perception of the voices with the hands that play them. And you know what? You're right. I think that is true. To think that it cannot be just said because it's logically convincing, hopefully, or just emotionally intriguing, and you respond to it for what it is, or what you think it means to you. And what if you don't play it like everybody else? Oh my God, how does other people play? How do other people think? I remember asking Richter, when I studied with him, how did he choose the tempi for his recording of the Well-Tempered Clavier? And he told me the next day would have been different. And I thought at the time, puzzled, oh my God, that means there is no rule, there is no system, there is no answer. Is it just fancy? Is it so superficial? He didn't dare explain how, or he didn't want to, or he didn't have to justify himself to me, a child, why he did these choices. But he told me something allegoric. He said, smell every second rose in a beautiful garden. And so in a way it means make your choice in your interpretation. Bring this, bring that, don't bring this, don't bring that, but do it meaningfully the way I think that's what it meant. It means to you, because I don't believe anybody can be believed, actor in theater or artist reciting a line of another author without embodying it in their own personality. Voice, expression, spacing of the words, expression, overstating, understating, just stating, what is the right tone, how much is overstated, not too much. It depends of the context, of the taste, of the understanding of the style, which changes with time too. People slide from one note to another in violin playing more than today, where they play literally as if they have keyboards on their instruments. And that was an expression of emotion when you had to rise, now they go tom, pom. So the tastes change in the way we apprehend, comprehend, or translate or transmit the music of the past. If we play on the Baroque instruments, then they tell us by their ways of doing how we voice them, how we phrase them, how we bow, how we articulate. When we play on an instrument that isn't the case to be the one for which it was written, we have advantages and disadvantages because of having more length of sound and more dynamic range, opportunity to make contrasts. So perhaps we then overstate it by essence, by just playing it. It's a lost in translation. But if you are doing it for the intervals, for the gestures, of the emotional meanings of these leaps and these patterns of decorative tones that could be step motion or thirds or broken thirds or whatever they are, you have to just follow the topography of the terrain and cherish it and see, oh, I'm going to bring this way, now bring that this way. I mean, I know it's very theoretical, and I'm sorry that I keep saying that, because I realize that even in my life, I still haven't solved the exact expression that I would think is meaningful for each of them. I think I oscillate, so it's perhaps what Victor told me next day would have been different. But perhaps not to that extent. Perhaps there are some more grounding elements that lead us to go to a certain expression rather than another of the text that comes with not all the encodings of the interpretation, but the hints and the suggestions through the intelligent score reading. And if not intelligent, then intuitive score reading. Doesn't mean that it's dumb to be intuitive, and doesn't mean that you're superior because you're analytical to the ones who feel. It's not the feel versus the learn, the innate versus the educated, the scholar versus the performer, but both.